You're listening to the St Michael's Arts Festival Book Club with Stuart Barr in conversation with author Isabel Rogers and cellist Daisy Vatalaro. All events for the festival are brought to you by our sponsor, Ludlow Thompson. If you appreciate this podcast or any of our content, please donate online at stmaf.org/donate. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to the podcast of the Stockwell Arts Festival, in which we're talking this afternoon about life, death, and cellos, which is the Stockwell Park Orchestra Series, written by the wonderful author Isabel Rogers. And myself, Stuart Barr, I'm going to be in conversation with her. Normally we would be doing this, of course, in sort of a nice coffee shop somewhere in South London, but of course, we're not doing that at the moment. We're going to be doing that over the line, down the line. And so Isabel is currently joining us from near Winchester in Hampshire. So hi, Isabel.
Hello, Stuart. Thank you very much for having me.
Well,
How lovely.
It's a great pleasure. I think it's a wonderful book that you've written in Life, Death and Cellos. I was gripped to the very end, and it's brilliant to be able to, sort of just chew over it for the next half hour or so. And we're also going to have some performances of some cello music from Daisy Vatalaro, who is a genuine Stockwell cellist, going to be giving us some Bach later on. So we're going to have a bit of a fun time, hopefully.
I should think she'll play it much better than my orchestra would have.
Well, for those of you who have not yet read the Life, Death and Cellos book, or any of the other books in the series, it's set obviously in Stockwell Park area, where there is this amateur orchestra full of amazing characters with wonderful plot twists, which hopefully Isabel will be able to give us a bit more details on later.
No spoilers.
How do you do an interview about a book without spoiling it entirely for everybody? I think we've got to tell them something. We have to tell them something.
I will tease, yes, but I'll be defiantly quiet about all the main bits.
So I think, first of all, to tell us, why did you decide to write a book about an orchestra in the middle of Stockwell?
I have spent probably about 15 years of my life in London and moving around a bit. And while I was, I think, living in Battersea, I did end up playing in an amateur orchestra that rehearsed in Stockwell. It was the Lambeth Orchestra when Chris Fifield was conducting. And I was there for a few years. And this was years and years and years ago. So eventually, when I decided to write a book that featured an orchestra, I was thinking, where should I set it? Probably London, because you can get all sorts of things going on, and it's such a mishmash of people and places, and the rhythm there is fantastic. And I think I just fell into it as a placeholder. I'll put it there because I know that area, and I've lugged my cello up the stairs and the escalators at Stockwell Tube and everything else. And I thought, I'll change it later, and it just stuck, and it worked. So I did Google madly to check that I wasn't actually stepping on any real Stockwell Park Orchestra toes, and I didn't realise that Lambeth rehearsed in that very road, and I probably might have picked a different road to call it if I'd known that, but it's not Lambeth, and it's not Brixton, and definitely made up. And I'll stand by that, and so will my lawyers.
Well, we feel very honoured that you have set the book right in the heart of Stockwell. And as you say, you're not treading on anybody's toes yet, but who knows? As a result of this book, and as a result of the Stockwell Arts Festival, maybe we might have our own Stockwell Park Orchestra in years to come. Who knows?
Well, the next book, I invented a whole new school and I plonked it in the middle of Stockwell, where there's no room for one at all. But that's another story.
But I also think it feels very good also from Stockwell's point of view, because, if you spoke to a lot of people in the country and mentioned the word Stockwell, obviously we've got, things that happened here in the London bombings, in the last decade, etc. And it's good to have a good news story, I think, about Stockwell.
Exactly.
To get the
It's a
names.
great part of London.
Now, I guess the other thing is that, you've set these books in Stockwell, but it's not actually so much about Stockwell, it's about music. And why would you have written a book that is about music from beginning to end?
It is. It's about music, and it's about the people who play music, and specifically amateur musicians, that they haven't made it their life. They're not paid to do the job. They do it for the absolute love of doing it. And I've spent many years of my life in amateur orchestras, but as a kid and as an adult, and choirs too. And you just look around, and as a writer, me certainly, I can't speak for all writers, but my brain never switches off character fishing. I just nick people all the time. So, sitting in a few bars rest, you look around the orchestra, you catch sight of what's going on, you think, this is too good to waste. Let's set something here. It's a fantastic world, which not a lot of people know about unless you've actually spent some time doing it. I remember very early days when I had a first draft of this, I tried to sell it to an agent who was very sniffy about it and said, oh, it's too niche. I can't sell this. Nobody would understand this world. And I got quite disheartened. But I think it is a world that people, even if they don't know it, would like learning about it. And that has proved to be the case.
I'm just looking at the copy of. I was thinking before I was doing this interview. Well, what sort of books, can we sort of point people to in terms of the style? And I'm probably going to reel off a list of things you'd either be terribly embarrassed about or perhaps impressed by. But the first book that came to mind on my shelf was sort of Tom Sharp's Porterhouse Blue, and I look on the front cover. And the review of it says that rarest and most joyous of products, a highly intelligent and funny book. And I have to say, if there's something which I think sums up Life, Death and Cellos, it is both highly intelligent about music, but also it's incredibly funny.
Can I get you to do all my interviews, Stuart? Because this is marvellous. Thank you very much.
I just feel that there is, obviously, I'm a musician and I understand all the musical context and all that sort of stuff in it. But I think that, I hope that somebody who doesn't know all that intimately should be able to read these pages and to be able to get inside the music and get inside the musicians.
I hope so. And that was a really fine line that my editor, Abby Heaton, and I had to plot. She herself is a musician, she's a flautist, but she's primarily an editor of books, and we were very conscious that probably maybe half the audience of this wouldn't necessarily have ever spent any time in an orchestra, may not play an instrument, certainly probably wouldn't read music. So I had to tread the line between writing for the people who would be bored if I tried to explain everything, the nuts and bolts of it, or wouldn't understand what the hell I was going on about if I suddenly started rattling off Italian musical terms as if they were, a second language. So it was a very difficult and very interesting line to pick as we edited the book.
And it's not just about an orchestra, but it's also about the soloists that take that take part in the concert as well. Particularly, obviously, cellos, and not exclusively cellos, but particularly the cello.
No.
So I'd just like to bring in now Daisy Vatalaro, who is a fabulous cellist living right in the heart of Stockwell in Ingleborough Street. Hi, Daisy.
Hi.
It's a great pleasure to have you with us today. One of the things that, of course, is so prevalent in this book is the cello runs right through from the first page through to the last page, and it feels like it is an entire concerto in itself, this book being played out. And obviously, you also have spent your entire life with the cello. And I was wondering what you were, tell me what it's like to play those Bach cello suites on your instrument.
It is wonderful. It's a privilege. It's a challenge. They're so seminal that it's really hard to come to them with innocence in a way, because everybody plays them and everybody knows them. So I think the biggest challenge in a way is to try to play them as though you've never heard them before, because you've heard them so many times. But it's wonderful. It's such a privilege. It's one of there aren't that many pieces for solo cello, and although I in many ways prefer playing with other people, it's the one time where you can be complete by yourself.
And why do you think it is that so little has been written for solo cello then?
Well, there's been more in the 20th century. Bach was one of the first, and I guess it was always, before him, the cello was much more often just an accompanying instrument, playing the bass. But one of the amazing things about the cello, I think, is its versatility, that it plays the bass so incredibly, but it also it's pretty famous for its sort of melodious qualities as well.
We have Isabel, the author, nodding wildly during this interview. Obviously, that's something which I imagine has inspired you greatly throughout this. Is its versatility, Isabel? Is that right?
Absolutely, and it's almost the closest. People say it's the closest you could get in an instrument to a human voice, because it can do all sorts of expressive things almost effortlessly if it's played the right way, and I'm sure it will be imminently. But it's just the most beautiful sound.
Fantastic stuff. Well, thank you so much indeed, Daisy. We are about to hear you play now the first Bach solo cello suite. I think that's right.
Yep.
And so here comes a bit of the prelude, as recorded in St Michael's Church. Thanks so much indeed, Daisy.
Thank you very much.
And so that was the prelude from Bach's first cello suite, played by the wonderful local cellist Daisy Vatalaro.
Just wonderful.
It is one of the most fabulous pieces of music, isn't it? I think
it really is.
Takes me back to my university days, where sort of 2:00 in the morning you'd be sitting down drinking a cup of tea, because I never used to drink alcohol, so I was drinking tea with people at 2:00 in the morning.
Listeners, do we believe this?
It is true. Anybody who knows me is true. But listening to unaccompanied Bach at 2:00 in the morning is even better than listening to unaccompanied Bach at 4:00 in the afternoon.
It's true. It's true. It's timeless.
So why is it that you chose the particular music that you did in the book? So there are 4 key pieces, is that right?
Yes, well, the first one had to kill off the original conductor, which is sort of an inciting incident. And I'm not giving anything away there, because I think he dies at the beginning of chapter 2 or something. And that was Adam Short riding a fast machine, because I had to get something that would get him so het up he would keel over. So that's got him out of the way. But then, yes, I had to, because there's this priceless Stradivari cello that is part of the plot, I had to showcase that, essentially. And I drew on the stuff that I knew. Basically, I was a cellist once and got vaguely hitting distance at playing the Elgar myself, although I never performed it. And I knew it was a great piece to describe, because it's got such contrasts in it, and I knew what it felt like to play, although not obviously to a professional level. So I felt I could describe it with more conviction than perhaps anything else. So that really I went with what I knew first and built it around that. And then, of course, we've got the shenanigans about soloists taking over, which I'm not going to get into because that's part of the plot that you're not allowed to know.
But we do have, I mean, it's a good selection, in fact, of music. I mean, there's some Richard Strauss in there.
With the wonderful Mrs. Ford Hughes.
A great character, and maybe we can talk about more about her in a minute. But I'm just thinking, just in terms of the sort of the gamut of this music, in which you're covering everything from English 20th century, going over to Germany. You're doing Mendelssohn. I guess you did both German and English, I suppose, musically at any rate.
I think amateur orchestras, certainly the ones I used to play in, tried to give you, especially when you were a teenager, so they tried to give you the broadest base and experience of playing all sorts of different kinds of music. So they would shove all sorts of different music in the same concert to give people a change. I think that they're probably less narrowly programmed than perhaps some professional programs are.
I'd never thought of it like that. That's really interesting. You've got me thinking about that now. I wonder whether, as you say, whether just professional curation of concert ultimately ends up being determined because of people in the marketing department, almost, as opposed to some sort of artistic team of people, which are it's a very interesting orchestral management you bring in, these characters you bring in. My favourite is the tea lady, who also happens to be a viola player. Is that right?
Oh, Pearl! They couldn't exist without Pearl. She's wonderful.
Well,
she's several people's favourite character as well. So yes, good company there.
But even then, so why did you choose her to become a viola player? I mean, a viola player of all things. Why?
Are you trying to tempt me into making viola jokes? One of the earlier drafts of this book, I did get rather carried away with my love of viola jokes, and there were certain footnotes that I put basically all the viola jokes I knew in footnotes, and they got taken out because they were a little bit mean. And Abby, the editor I mentioned before, she's a much nicer person than I will ever be, and she said, "Shall we just lay off the violas slightly?" And I thought, all right then. But viola players take a joke.
Absolutely. I think my favourite viola story actually was when I was conducting, and I will not mention the name of the orchestra, in which the shop steward of the orchestra was one of the viola players, and his way of communicating that we were, this was the end of the 3-hour call, and we were not going to go a second over that 3-hour call, was that the wristwatch he had on his arm was placed in a particular fashion, such that in order to look at the face of the clock, he was grasping his instrument in such a way that the viola then sort of went upright like a stop sign. It was basically a stop sign to the orchestra. Everybody knew that the shop steward was looking at his wristwatch. That was the end of the section, and viola comes up.
He knew what he was doing. See, a shop steward, I wouldn't have thought to put one into an amateur orchestra, because we don't have that kind of stuff. I've never spent any time in a professional orchestra, so I wouldn't presume to know how they work at all.
And tell me about some of the other characters in the piece. So you've also got a couple of very different types of conductors in there. And again, we're not going to spoil too much about the plot.
No.
But what is it about conductors as a breed, as an animal? Because they're very much they're very different to anybody else in the plot.
They are. Now, Stuart, am I talking to you with your interviewer hat on or with your conductor hat on?
Entirely with my interviewer hat on.
They are a breed of their own. I have been in awe of some in my earlier life, but I think I've got over that now.
Ooh, I think there's confessions going on here.
Oh dear, no, the stuff that got edited out of this book, you wouldn't believe. No, they are very interesting. There's something that makes a person want to stand up and tell other people how to play the music because they think they know best. And I find that character trait extremely interesting. And some of them are almost a different personality when they stand up and wave their arms about. They are extrovert and not domineering, but, forceful and will speak their mind. And you get them, in a corner of a room later, and they're the most introverted, quiet people in the world. And I find that incredibly interesting, how you switch from one to the other. They're people. People are interesting. Different kinds of people are interesting.
Well, now we know very much that you are an avid people watcher, and that everybody who knows you must be very, very careful for fear that they will end up in your books one day.
It's hilarious. I've got. I mean, my mother was a trained opera singer. My sister is a semi-professional singer, and I know lots and lots of professional musicians. And each one of them separately has come up to me and is convinced that they are a character in this book. And I have to say, well, no, I'm sorry. I might have taken a little bit out of some of you, but I haven't nicked anybody whole.
Very good. Very good. Well, I think it's time to hear from Daisy again, playing this time the Sarabande from Bach's first cello suite. And that was the Sarabande from Bach's first cello suite, played by Daisy Vatalaro. And so welcome back to Isabel Rogers, and we're talking about Life, Death and Cellos, her first book in the Stockwell Park Orchestra Series.
That's right.
Yeah, I love the way that, I mean, in fact, you can confess this. Have you signed like a sort of multi-deal book already? This book deal, six books.
I've just signed, not six, I've just signed for the fourth one. Ooh. Yes. The second one is out, Boulder's Brass. The third one, Continental Riff, is coming out in January. And I've just signed to write the fourth one, and I've not written it yet.
And has Hollywood been knocking on your door? This is what we want to know.
Oh, I wish, Stuart. I'm open to any and all offers.
Because I know that as soon as I mentioned that, the fact that there's a possibility of a film being made here, I know what the good burgers of Stockwell Park will be doing. They will now be tarting up their houses because they will be wanting the film locations to be, set in their house, in their part of the road. I guarantee it.
I'm not going to be responsible for the gentrification of Stockwell. That would drum me out in no time.
But I want to know much more about, where your musical background has come from, because you just talked about your mother being an opera singer there.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's not. I mean, you didn't train as a professional musician, did you?
Not at all. No, I do come from this very musical family, and my sister and I first got started on the violin at 6 and 4 or something. She's a bit older than me. She carried on with violin, and I gave up after 3 months. And then from about the age of 4 to 9, I didn't play anything, and my mother was terrified that she might have spawned some unmusical child, and it was dreadful, and I was letting the slide down. Until eventually I heard someone play the cello, and I thought, well, I could try that. So I started the cello at 9, and I'd been singing all the way through as well. You can't get out of that in my family, and we went all through, the church choir and things like that. So I learned to read music pretty early on, and it was just there all the way through. We went to this strange music camp all my life. My mother was going there before I was born, so I spent all my holidays playing and singing music, and that was it. It sort of made me.
Fantastic. I'm just wondering though that you've got. I suppose when we read a book about a particular area, and you think, well, how much research has the author done? Now, in this instance, you've told us that you played in all these amateur orchestras, and that you weren't thinking of writing a book at the time. Or maybe were you? Maybe was
not this particular book. I was already writing, but I was writing other stuff.
Right, okay. So because you were writing poetry at that point, was that right?
Yes. I read poetry first. Yes. And I wrote another novel before I started these, which is very bad, and it's still in a drawer. Nobody liked it because it had too much Nietzsche and not enough jokes, I think. But yeah.
I think that's what you call juvenilia, I think, in composers' terms, or pre-opus works, or whatever you call it.
Yes.
So we've got you as the young person growing up in a household full of music. You then went off to university to do something completely different. Is that right?
Yes, I've dropped out of 2 universities. I didn't get to the end of any of them, and neither of them did music, so that was never going to be a part of a professional plan there at all.
But then what did you do? So you left university first and second time. What did you go and do?
Absolutely, yes. I went on a touch typing course and fell into a temp job in the City of London, which was hilarious, because then you just work in loads of places and fall into permanent jobs because they love you, and hang around London for 15 years more than you had planned to, and join an orchestra. Nothing's planned in my life.
But then after that, then you had a bit of a dramatic move out of London. Where did you go to?
Well, I ended up in the Highlands of Scotland. Yes, I hated the job I was doing. Suddenly realised that I didn't like London anymore. It was too full of people, too smelly, and I wasn't getting any writing done, crucially. I was trying to write this what ended up as the first novel, and I was trying to get my poetry published and things. And it was just too busy. So I thought, enough is enough. I need some horizon and mountains, and that's it. So yes, it could have been a bit dramatic, but I did end up in a little tiny crofter's cottage in the Highlands of Scotland, which was 3 fields away from the nearest lane. And I opened the door in the morning, and there was this sort of 180-degree view of mountains and nothing else, and it was wonderful, and I stayed there for 10 years.
Well, you might not know this, but there are quite a lot of people in the Stockwell Park area who adore the Highlands of Scotland, spend a lot of time there, I being one of them. But there are quite a lot of people, so you have to tell us a bit more when you say just I've gone to the Scottish Highlands. Whereabouts?
I was about halfway down Loch Ness on the south side, the quiet side. It was gorgeous. And then I wrote there for maybe a couple of years until my money really did run out, and I had to get a job, and I ended up working in Inverness and the NHS for a bit. And then I sort of mixed and matched stuff like that. And that's another thing, you see. Now, wherever I go, I pick up characters. I ended up setting a radio sitcom that I wrote with some characters that I met in the NHS in the Highlands. So nowhere is safe, Stuart. Watch out.
But goodness me, so that must have been a big shift going from Stockwell to the Highlands. But then you've done another shift again because you're now near Winchester. Why there? I
have, yes. Yes, I moved back down south for a man. Never move for a man. It's not worth it, Stuart. But yes, I ended up in Hampshire here. And yeah, well, that afforded me another opportunity because I ended up being Hampshire Poet Laureate in 2016. And that was a fantastic opportunity, going around the whole county, waving my arms, which you can't see on a podcast, being Kermit-like and enthusing about poetry and taking it to schools and stuff like that, which was fantastic.
So does every county have its own laureate? Is this?
Lots do. Some don't. It's up to the individual and how much money the council seems to have. Some do.
Because I think that this is clearly what Lambeth needs. This is we have the largest arts centre in Europe on our doorstep, dormant though it's been for the last couple of months.
You may already have one. I didn't do my homework. I didn't look it up. Maybe.
I think it's time now to hear some more Bach on the cello. So Daisy Vatalaro is going to be playing us the Jig from the first suite by Bach. Thank you very much indeed, Daisy. That was the Jig from the first Cello Suite by Bach, J.S. Bach. And now it's back to my little discussion here with Isabel Rogers, the author of Life, Death and Cellos, the Stockwell Park Orchestra Series. So, Isabel, here we are. We're having a chat over Zoom. Okay, we've never met each other, but we're sort of, we're having a nice engaged chat, and there are lots of people.
I feel I've known you for years now.
Well, Stockwell has embraced the Zoom, revolution in quite a big way because, we managed to do a massive quiz, 2 massive quizzes actually through the whole of, in the height of the lockdown, organised by one of the people around here. And it was incredible because we had breakout rooms of different houses together, and it brought an amazing sense of community about it. But I guess the thing about... And
I've been seeing you've been doing the Stockwell live concerts. You've been extremely busy in lockdown.
We absolutely. We've been doing. We're very fortunate that Stockwell has a lot of people who very much appreciate the arts, and it feels like a great honour to live here. But I guess the thing that when I'm looking at the book, when I'm reading the book, the first thing that comes to my mind is there are people that are close to each other. There are people that are rehearsing with one another, and there are sort of people going on the tube and things like that. And you're thinking, this is actually, I don't know, we've become so accustomed in London to just thinking this is a bit weird now.
It's a different world.
It is a different world. And the great tragedy of this time is that it's very tricky to make music. Now, as professionals, we're in a better position than amateurs are because of the way that law has been laid out. But still, there are great concerns. A great friend of mine was one of the researchers who took part in the Perform study, which is looking at COVID and how particularly singers, can transmit it.
Oh, yes.
Which is
my sister. I spoke to my sister yesterday, and her choir has just got back to socially distanced singing last week for the first time, and she's saying it's just very strange, but everyone is so delighted to be able to do it.
Well, this was exactly what I was about to come on to, because there are various things going on, obviously, when you've got the orchestra in the Stockwell Park Orchestra, because it's not just about making the music. You've got all the people there who this is a pillar of their lives. It's a pillar of their lives, and I almost sort of want you to write the dystopian novel, which is what happens when the pillar of their lives is taken away, and just see how difficult it is for those people, because that's what happened to hundreds of thousands of amateur musicians up and down the country at the moment.
Oh, it tears my heart out what's happening to the music and arts in general. I don't know how people whose central point of their life is music, I don't know how they are coping. I mean, I know a lot of them, and we keep cheerful as best we can, but it must be so hard. And I did wonder, I've just been writing a short story that's going to be coming out between now and January when the big book comes out, and I did think about writing a short story that was set in lockdown, and how all these players, exactly what you suggested, how they were all coping, but actually I thought, no, my job here is to make people laugh and to look on the bright side, and what we probably don't want is people moping about the thing that we're all living through anyway. So I rather took the view that my job was to ignore it and carry on trying to make people laugh.
And I think laughing is certainly something that you very much do in this. I'm not even sure whether I can quote this particular... I'm not even sure I can actually...
Is it very sweary? I do get quite sweary.
No, this is not a particularly sweary bit, but there is a particular line about the... One of the conductors who ends up in the local morgue through dying, as you say right at the start of the book. And there's this graphic description of him sliding into the fridge of the local hospital morgue. As his body finally stopped moving, the settling momentum dislodged some internal gas, and thus the aroma of Oscar's last earthly fart was shut in with him to start eternity.
I'm sorry about that.
It's brilliant. I love it. It sort of have this, sort of aroma of Carry On films, and it sort of feels that this is what P.G. Wodehouse would be writing if he were alive in 2020.
Oh, well, we can but dream of emulating that.
One of the things which I'm always very passionate about within the music world and in producing some of the concerts that we produce here is the idea that genre actually confines people's imaginations, and I always try to cut across genres and get musicians who have amazing musical abilities in different fields. But it's very tricky as a musician to be a cross genre.
It really is, yes.
Very, very difficult. But as a writer, I imagine very difficult as well.
There are genre wars, yes, that's true. People get into tribes, I think, and they feel comfortable about what they do and find it very difficult to cross over. There is another way of thinking about it, in that if you go into a vast bookshop, in the days when we were allowed to go into vast bookshops, booksellers need to know how to sell a book, and I completely appreciate that. If someone comes in saying, I want to have a book that makes me laugh, that has this or that, the bookseller will have to be able to point to a shelf and say, look, there's a whole shelf of books like that, because we have decided that they are like each other enough for me to be able to point you in that direction, and I think you will find something that you like. So I can see it from both sides, but it does feel very restricting, I think, yes. I try and break out of that. I don't know if I succeeded.
I think we will leave that up to the readers to decide. But I think it's sort of an interesting theme also that runs through that in the height of all this classical music going on, that there is one character, Mrs. Ford Hughes, who is a patron of the
a force of nature,
a battle axe, who accidentally gets squashed by the dead conductor falling off the stage.
Unfortunate Oscar,
etc. A very, very funny scene. Who then, I love the way that you then manage to bring the plot round to how to solve it. Was basically the Mrs. Ford Hughes, of course, is a wonderful amateur singer who thinks the world of herself. So it would be completely natural for an orchestra, therefore, to try and get more money out of her by employing her as the soloist. And you go to amazing lengths to describe the fruitiness of how bad the music is that is coming out of her mouth.
And this is where my soprano friends got very nervous. But I really didn't nick them. Mrs. Ford Hughes is all of her I think.
If there were an actress... Okay, so come on, look. Right, okay, so we are casting this now. We are casting this for Hollywood, and the Burghers of Stockwell are getting ready to, have their houses let out this. What... Mrs. Ford Hughes, who would play it?
Oh, goodness. Well, Meryl Streep's already been there, I suppose, as Florence.
With Florence Foster Jenkins, yeah.
So
but she's not quite Florence Foster Jenkins, though, is she?
She's not,
She's
no.
more the sort of... I don't know. I sort of imagine, going back to Carolyn films, it might have been Hattie Jakes maybe 40 years ago or something like that.
Yes. Oh, she would have been perfect. Yes, if we can imagine Hattie Jakes and then modernise her up to somewhere, that would be good.
Or Dawn
I've deliberately.
French, maybe?
Wouldn't she be brilliant? Yes. Yes.
Actually,
she's now Dawn
I've
French
got a
in my
suggestion. I've got a suggestion. In fact, a Clapham resident is Miriam Margolyes.
Oh, she'd be wonderful. I love Miriam.
There
right, can you get your people onto that, please, and we'll sort something out.
So we've cast Miriam Margolyes in this. Who else are we going to cast here? What about the Vane conductor? Well, Vane conductor number 2, should we say?
There are 3, I ought to say, in this book. Oh gosh, well, he's very vain and a bit of a sleazeball. I don't know. I should have done my homework here, shouldn't I? I hadn't dared dream about this far. Somebody who's willing to play characters that you wouldn't trust as far as you can throw them, I think. Somebody very sexist.
It would have to be what's his name? Hugh
Grant.
Hugh Grant. Of course,
the lovely Hugh.
Yes.
I couldn't make Hugh play that part.
Oh no, but come on,
he would do it brilliantly.
He would.
Of course.
He would do it brilliantly, utterly brilliantly. So there we go. Listen, we I'm sure we could spend the entire day doing this. But I think that's one of the great things about a good book is that you can sit there and the characters leap off the page, and therefore it's quite normal to want to characterise these people. But also,
I do miss them when I finished a book. I miss their company, which sounds a bit odd.
But also, for me, it really is the music which leaps off the page here, and so I hope for everybody who wants to read this book, they have that similar sort of effect on them that you can revel in the mastery of the music as well.
Well, I'm very honoured that somebody in your profession would think that about this book, which means it's done what I set out to do. So thank you for that.
Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today, and. Please do Stockwell Burghers read Life, Death and Cellos, available from it must be there must be up in the Kennington bookshop. We've got to make sure that it's up there for sale.
I'll make sure they stock it.
There you go. But you've also got some more titles coming out soon, so what's the dates of those?
Well, Bold as Brass is already out. That's the second book. The third book, Continental Riff, is coming out on the 14th of January. And the fourth book, I have no idea what's going to happen because I haven't written it yet.
But there's also short stories there?
Yes, there are short stories there, free online downloads. So if you go to the Farrago website, my publisher, Farrago, you sign up for updates about the Stockwell Park Orchestra and they will send you a link to free downloads. The first one was a high choir act, which I did about Sperminalium, which all sorts of things go wrong. Don't ask. And the next one is just about to go live. It's about a wedding bagpiper.
Well, there you go, bringing in a Loch Ness there, I can see. I haven't read the one about Sperminalium, which, for those of you who don't know, is one of the most amazing choral pieces of all time, written for 40 individual singers. I imagine that there's a lot of that's a good breeding ground for good characters.
It's got a hot pink cover.
Hot pink? Ooh. Very good. Excellent stuff. Well, anyway, listen, it's been a huge pleasure chatting to you today, Isabel. And
it's been a delight. Thank you.
I hope that everybody wants to read the book, and if they don't want to pay for it, then be the cheapskates and buy get the free downloads, and then buy.
You'll be hooked.
Then buy the real thing. Definitely for Christmas. Anyway, thanks so much indeed.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.